And I am so grateful to be here. I just want to get closer to the camera. So my name is Dr. Thiele Thatch. I have all these initials by my name, PHR, SHRM, MBA, whatever. But most importantly, I am a VNNC neighborhood council member. I am the parliamentarian and chair of the Human Services Committee. And I'm also, by day, I am the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Paychex, the company. I had the opportunity to work for LA County briefly as an executive fellow. And actually, that was how I developed my dissertation topic around executive hiring decisions that impact social service programs. And it really was around a lot of different frameworks that we can discuss if you're interested. I owned my own consulting business because that's what I thought I wanted to do, but I do still have the ability to consult at times when I do have time, which is rarely ever. And I work also at Walden University as a contributing faculty member. I work with doctoral students who are studying public policy and law, and I'm new, so I'm also learning. So I like to call this my credibility slide. These are all the companies I work for. I moved to Los Angeles for a job at Live Nation, where I became eventually the chief diversity officer for Live Nation. So enough about me. I'm looking forward to talking to you. So welcome everyone to Using an Inclusion and Diversity Lens. So neighborhood councils are the closest form of government to the people. Members and participants of neighborhood councils are as diverse as the neighborhoods we represent and serve. And this session will tackle how we can work towards creating a truly diverse community, celebrating the diversity of our neighbors, especially those that look, love, pray, and live differently than we do. So welcome again. Today, the objectives include reviewing key concepts, exploring the value of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and just looking at discussing ways to take action. So I wanted to start with defining diversity. You know, I've been doing this work around diversity, equity, and inclusion at least for 10 years. I identify as a heterosexual female and a Black woman. And I'm always surprised that people ask me, what is diversity? When I tell people what I do, I literally hear this every other day, what is diversity? So I never want to assume that people know what that is. And so diversity is the state of being diverse and a great deal of variety. And it just means, in general, being different. So diversity is any point of human difference. It can be any distinction that makes one individual different from another, including one's gender, physical makeup, their appearance, ethnicity, physical and mental limitations, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, income level, geographical location, region, occupation, marital family status, religion, education. So in the context of our community, valuing diversity means creating a community that respects and includes differences. We want to recognize the unique contributions that different people can make and create, and how these different people, like myself and you, can make in creating neighborhoods that appreciates all of our neighbors. So I had the pleasure and the honor of working with Vernee Myers, who is now famous for this quote. And she describes diversity as being invited to the party and inclusion as being asked to dance. And this quote has become so popular because I don't know about you, but for me, and I can literally visualize, especially in my high school years, what it's like not to be included. and to show up at that high school dance or that dance and just be a wallflower, or being afraid that no one would ask you to dance. Now, of course, you can dance by yourself all night, and you can even just, not even want to go to the dance or not dance at all. But in general, most of us want to feel included. Most of us want to be invited to dance by someone, even if it's invited to go down the Soul Train line. So you know how you have the Soul Train line and they're like, come on, do your dance down the Soul Train line. That's what it feels like. So when looking at this example, if diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance, the ultimate goal would be belonging. And so belonging is dancing with your partner or friends at the party to your own playlist. When you can get the opportunity to dance, but not just to dance, but to your music, and that other people enjoy that same music. Now that's an amazing feeling, and that's the feeling we want to develop as we work with each other. So let's talk about that, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. So this is a really interesting graphic that is really important, that when we look at the iceberg, what do we see? We see the tip of the iceberg, and we hear about this tip all the time. We hear about age, race, and gender expression, but there are so many other things that we may not see. And that's at the bottom of the iceberg, unfortunately, where danger is actually because you're not paying attention, right? So there's gender identity, nationality, military experience, religion, physical ability, socioeconomic class, education, political views. There's so many things that we may not see. And so we really harm ourselves and others when we just focus on the tip of the iceberg and make judgments. We have, that's in our DNA to do that. And sometimes we don't see things in the proper social context. We need to apply that social context. What does it mean to be a woman, or to be a Black person or a white person, or to be privileged? There's no one answer. And we also need to take in consideration our life experience, which are really the primary determinant for most, and usually much more salient than what others can see. Diversity is indeed like this iceberg. So below the surface, there are all of these things that make up the entire whole person that are not easily identifiable. And that cannot be easily summed up with just a stereotype or by simply acknowledging what you see on the outside. So when we talk about diversity today, it's really easy to simply focus on what we see. But always remember, there are different perspectives, backgrounds, and views. These are the things that fuel innovation. And they also can be the thing that prevents us from appreciating the uniqueness that we find on our neighborhood councils. So I want to do a brief activity with you. You're not going to have to speak out loud. You're welcome to, but I'd rather you just kind of, get a piece of paper or get your phone out and just write down your 5 closest best friends. So take a minute to write down your 5 closest best friends. And I'll give you like 5 seconds or so to do that. So write down your friends. Is everyone done doing that or close to? Oops, oh my goodness, it just jumped. I'm sorry, I hit the mouse and it jumped on all my slides. Okay. All right, sorry about that. So write down your 5 closest best friends, and then write down the 5 people. Next part of the activity is to write down the 5 people with whom you are closest at work. So I'm trying to look at the chat to see. There we go. Somebody's in the chat. Hello, Lauren. Good to see you again. So Lauren and everyone on the call, please write down your 5 closest best friends. Write down the 5 people with whom you are closest with at work.
What if you're retired?
The 5 people you hang out with when you do whatever you do now that you're retired and living your most awesome life. Where do you, if you go to, meet your friends at Target or Trader Joe's? Who are those 5 people you take with you? And there's no wrong or right answer. It's really for yourself. You don't have to, please don't tell me the answer. It wouldn't even matter because I wouldn't know who they are. But the point is, take an honest assessment. And if you didn't have time to do this right now, trying to, oh goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm having a technical difficulty as I'm trying to look at the chat and look at the screen. So you are leading, oh, wow. Please, I'm having technical difficulties. I was doing so well. Okay. Meet your in-group. In terms of diversity, this is where you feel most comfortable. So let me rewind. So you've written down your 5 closest best friends. You wrote down the 5 people with whom you're closest at work. Do they look the same? And you don't have to answer out loud. These are your closest friends, partners, where you live and represent in your in-group. So these are the people, whoever they are, that you trust and consider normal. They represent those who you feel the most comfortable with. How does your friend group at work compare with your friend group at home? Are they the same people? Are they the same type of people? Are they all a part of one group? Are they all, for example, Hispanic? Are they all Black women? I see Ron with his hand raised. Yes, Ron.
I'm sorry. I'll hold it until later because it's a little off topic.
Oh yeah, please let me make it through the let me make it through the presentation. So think about your 5 closest best friends. Write down your questions, please. I will definitely have time for discussion. My presentation will take about 25, 30 minutes, so it definitely should have time. Okay, thank you. All right, so what commonalities do you see? And for example, again, as I was saying, if you have all one homogeneous group, then you may want to ask yourself, why is that? It may be a surprise to you, or you may have a different group of friends that are outside of work opposed to at work. So now let's define inclusion. So for a proper definition, inclusion is the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, such as those who have physical or mental disabilities and members of other minority groups. It involves promoting an environment where all people are welcomed and treated with respect and they feel included and integrated. If you could please mute yourself if you're not speaking, that'd be, thank you so much. Okay, so inclusion means we're given equal access to opportunities. So let's think about that for a minute. What would happen if each and every neighborhood council member and participant, in spite of views and beliefs, felt included and felt that they were encouraged and would be given opportunities to contribute their ideas and concerns? Ask yourself, is that happening in your neighborhood council? If not, what can we do to make it happen? So we're going to talk more about that. As we actively work with diverse people to be inclusive, you will realize immediately that it takes action. Inclusion actually involves work. In fact, diversity happens organically. It is what it is. The people on this Zoom today, we're diverse. We didn't plan it. We showed up and we're just all diverse. It happens organically. So, but inclusion takes being intentional. For example, when someone is in your presence, you can say hello. That's a small gesture that may be natural or unnatural for some. However, recognizing someone with a warm greeting, intentionally letting them know that you see them, is a universal sign for respect. For some of us, we would need to make an extra effort to be warm or to greet someone warmly. And so the point is, this is a simple gesture, but for some may require being very intentional. So for some people, it's not that easy to just say hello. But when they realize that this is something they need to work on, they may work harder at saying hello to people to make them feel included. So for me, when I first joined the neighborhood council, that was the first thing I did. I didn't know anyone. So I looked around the room to determine who was friendly, who would be friendly to me. Some of those members welcomed me, some ignored me, some didn't say hello, some didn't give me eye contact. At times I felt excluded. And it was exactly one of those reasons that I wanted to join the neighborhood council so I could help provide an experience where others felt included. So now I selfishly talk about these topics to make sure of that. Now let's look into equality versus equity. This is a really hot topic at times. Equality means providing different people with the support they need that makes it possible for them to have the same access. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. So an example of equality is a community meeting where all members of the community are invited about a local environmental health concern and is held in English, though English is not the primary language for 25% of the residents. An example of equity would be the community leaders hire translators to attend the meeting or offer an additional meeting held in another language. Another example of equality would be all public schools in a community have computer labs with the same number of computers and hours of operation during school hours. An example of equity would be computer labs in lower income neighborhoods. They have more computers and printers as well as longer hours of operation, as some students may not have access to the internet at home. And this is such a true situation in LA, where there's areas in LA that have no access to internet because of poverty. So let's talk briefly about stereotypes. A stereotype is an exaggerated belief, generalization, image, or distorted truth about a person or group. Stereotypes affect what we think, feel, and how we respond to people who are different from ourselves. After time, these responses become automatic. And as adults, most of us are still on automatic. When we stereotype, we place a person in a particular mental file that is not based on information gained through personal knowledge, interaction, or experience with that person or group of people. Instead, we just assign the person to a mental file based on what we believe about the individual or group to which the person belongs. Once learned, stereotypes are called up instantly by our brains, and stereotypes exist for every group of people imaginable. Even though we may not like to admit it, we all stereotype people. Once in place, stereotypes are extremely difficult to undo, and stereotyping often leads to bias. Bias is a lot of what we're going to talk about today, and bias is a tendency. Cognitive bias shortcuts can cause problems when we're not aware of them and we apply them inappropriately, leading to rash decisions or discriminatory practices. Relying on biases but keeping them in check requires a delicate balance of self-awareness. And your willingness to examine your own possible biases is an important step in valuing diversity. We all have biases, and unfortunately or fortunately, we cannot talk about biases enough because it's really key to how we address a lot of the issues in our communities and in our world. We have to look at our biases. So what can we do to understand bias? As human beings, we are all biased in different ways. Biases are prejudices in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. Unconscious biases are social stereotypes, often about certain groups of people that individuals form outside their own conscious awareness. Our biases usually kick in when we are unfamiliar with a thing, person, or situation. So it's kind of our defense mechanism. That's a natural part of who we are and how we were built to be as human beings, to have that bias to protect ourselves, to recognize danger immediately, and to group people, things, places into specific groups so we'll know how to handle those. Although using our biases can be good in keeping us from harm when working with people, bias can lead to poor decision making. The good news is we can learn to reduce our bias. So let's look at some types of bias. Some may be really like old hat to you, and some may be new, but I'm just going to introduce these concepts and then we're going to do a brief exercise. So the in-group bias is the tendency that people have to favor their own group above others. An example is a decision maker offers unfair advantage or disadvantage to candidates based on perceptions of similarity. Availability bias is the human tendency to think that examples of things that come readily to mind are more representative of the truth than is actually the case. So, for example, a decision maker is inhibited from looking for and considering all potentially relevant information because they have ideas that they can recall quickly because that's what they're comfortable with. So it's difficult for them to recall other ideas. Descriptive stereotyping is the belief that some categories of people are more competent than others, and a decision maker's belief that some categories of people are more competent can affect their interpretation of qualifications and expectations for future performance. Then we've heard of the halo and horn effect, where one person's impression of another is substantially influenced by one's thoughts and feelings about that person. And so an example of that would be a decision maker offering an unfair advantage or disadvantage to candidates based on their preoccupation with a particular character trait, like red hair, where they may think that people with red hair are better or maybe worse than others. Confirmation bias is the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. And so a decision maker loses the ability to objectively evaluate their committee members. Instead, they select weighing only on those factors that confirm their own preconceived ideas, whether they are positive or negative. And the last one on the list, and there's many biases. This is just a short list, by the way. So if you're really fascinated by this for any reason, please look up different biases. The recency effect is the phenomenon of a person most easily remembering something that has happened recently compared to remembering something that may have occurred a while back. And an example of that would be a decision maker unfairly evaluating on performance during a limited period of time rather than considering the totality of a situation, the totality, just dealing with the most recent thing that happened. And we see that a lot in our neighborhood councils where we just focus on what's recently in the news or what's recently happening in our political landscape, when we need to take a step back and look at the total picture and maybe even the history of why things are happening. So let's break the bias. So why does understanding bias matters? I was on another panel and it definitely became clear that not everyone wants to talk about bias. I believe that you're here because you are interested, but it does help our communication around inclusion and diversity. Even if it's uncomfortable, we need to find the courage to give and receive constructive feedback. And that happens because of us having a better understanding of our own bias. So here's a scenario. Now I want to hear from you. A person on your committee makes stereotypical jokes about different racial groups, making others feel uncomfortable. First of all, how would you identify this bias? You can either chat your response or just jump in. I'm trying to check the chat. So again, a person on your committee makes stereotypical jokes about different racial groups, making others feel uncomfortable, or a person on one of the committees. What type of bias? Oh, go ahead.
I would say, if I'm on the committee, that's uncalled for, and we're not here for that.
That's right. And what type of bias would that be? That would be a stereotype.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's do another one. So a board member or committee member comments to you that she's glad another member decided to choose them for a committee because they went to the same college that she did. What type of bias would that be?
In group.
Yeah,
Confirm-
that's right. What did you say? Somebody said something else though.
Oh, I was gonna say confirmation.
Okay, no, it's in-group bias. So, but that's great. Thank you for saying. So it was one of these choices in the little bubble. So it was in-group. So here's the thing about in-group. It's really simple. And I want to draw this point at home because a lot of times I do this work, in corporate settings and of course in these settings, it's really simple. There's always in-group and there's always an out-group. You're either in the in-group or you're in the out-group. That can switch up at any given time. When you wrote down or thought about your 5 best friends and you thought about your 5 friends at work, those 5 people were your in group. Everybody outside of those 5 people were your out group. Is that a problem? No. It's only a problem when it stops other people in the out group from promotion, economic promotion, being offered board positions, being able to voice their opinion, right? So when you're excluding people because they're in your out group, that's the problem. So that's why it's really important to be aware that all of us have in groups and all of us have out groups. Some people might call them a clique, but it's a lot more serious than cliques, because a lot of times it's comfortable to be in your in group. It's like a family, but those same in groups, even with the best intentions, can exclude people who are in that out group. So we can talk more about that. So one more scenario, you're discussing committee members and one of the board members says, I liked her, but she's too family oriented to fully commit to us. Which bias would that be out of these colorful bubbles here?
How about label and performance?
Stereotype.
Okay. So I'm gonna read it one more time. So you're discussing, you're discussing committee members and one of the boards says, I like her, but she's too family oriented. What is that implying? That she's
Gender
family
bias.
There you go. They're implying that because she has a family, and it could be he has a family, it could be any of the pronouns. The point is, they're looking at the person's gender to determine if they're qualified to be a committee member or qualified to do any job. That's a bias based on gender. And what's so important about gender bias is literally a violation of federal and state law. It's not just a bad thing to do, or it's be nice to people because of their gender. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects people from discrimination based on gender. So I'm not going to get into the different laws, but as committee members, as council members, as neighbors, we always talk about the neighborhood council. And my approach on the neighborhood council is just really understanding our rights as neighborhood council members, but bottom line, our rights as people who are citizens of the United States or who are living in the United States, right? And so there's federal and state laws that protect us from a lot of these biases. Well, a lot of these, the result of these biases. So just wanted to be aware. It's about awareness. And we can talk more about that. Like I said, I'm pretty sure we're going to have time. Okay, so often we make judgments about others based on what we think we know. So as we all know, we all have a lot to learn. we make judgments based on what we see with our eyes, what's visible to us. We need to take the time to get to know someone beyond the obvious. I know I won't say her name, but there was someone on the council with me. And I literally went just by the way she carried herself and her body language. I thought, I'm in corporate America and I have my own little biases. And I'm thinking, oh, she's not engaged. She's not this, a lot of negative thoughts about her. I mean, I didn't dislike her, but I didn't think that she was the most capable person on the board. Like I admit, very judgmental. We all do things like this. And it's been a lesson for me because this person has been the most valuable once I got to know the person, the most valuable, the most brilliant, the most to offer, right? So if I would have continued to dismiss this person based on my own biases that I just described to you, this person has helped me so much. I would have missed out on the opportunity to learn, grow, and be supported by this person. So I just want to encourage you. I think and the woman again, Vernee Myers, who trained me early on. She had been a mentor to me early on. One thing if you look it up on YouTube, she has a YouTube video that says "Run towards your biases." So I knew enough to know that when I was having that negative reaction or that negative bias towards this person on the committee, that I needed to check myself and make even more of an opportunity to get to know this person. And I am so grateful. And it was such a reward. Honestly, 10 years ago, I probably would have just written her off. I'm like, oh, she's, I don't want to be bothered. And we do that because it's just is our default mechanism. So I just want to encourage you, those people on the board, like your worst nightmares and the people who are getting on your nerves, I challenge you to try to call them and meet with them for coffee or just really just make an effort to run towards that uncomfortable feeling. So here's some practical steps we can take. Creating common ground, being vulnerable. That's what I described, being vulnerable, being intentional, finding my own blind spot. So I knew that was a blind spot for me. I work in corporate America where I was working at the time. It was very cutthroat. So you see a weakness, you just go in and no, you're weak. I don't want to talk to you, right? So that's not the proper behavior to collaborate and build relationships, but it became a blind spot for me because that's how I was adapting in the world that I was living in. But that wasn't creating any collaboration on the committee or on the board. So that was my personal blind spot. Talk about differences. Not everyone has my experience. Not everyone has your experience, but all of our experiences are valuable. Okay, here's a long list. And if you want this deck, I'm happy to share it with you. So just reach out some type of way. I'm thiele.thatch@vnnc.org, by the way. And let me stop for a breath. Oh, someone put in stereotype and gender. Okay, thank you, Lauren. I saw you participate. I just wanted to make sure I captured you. Okay, so how might unconscious bias show up? This one is really important because this happens a lot in our interactions and in our meetings, right? So giving an approving nod in a meeting. I try really hard to do that when I try to smile. Like I trust me, I'm not the nicest person all the time. I'm not always, oh, she's so nice. I do it to consciously encourage people. So if I know someone is having a hard time in our council meeting or a neighbor, you could tell they're coming in and they're agitated. It can really change the room to just, hi, how you nod. I recognize you, step over to them, welcome to the meeting, right? Do you want to? Are you tired? Are you annoyed? Sometimes yes, but this is the work that we're talking about. Publicly recognizing the work, ideas, contributions of a person. I've learned early on, and this is how we influence our neighbors. This is how we influence people. Publicly say, great job, Erica. Wow, thank you for the Zoom call. Erica, thank you, right? I know you don't have to be here on a Saturday, you're here. Sharing additional information about the person when someone introduces them. The ultimate thing is you want someone to know, and I actually did this in the last session with Lauren, and I mean it authentically. I see you. I hear you. I don't know. I may not agree with you. I may not. Don't hear me say that. I may disagree, but I see you. I hear you, and your opinion is valued, and doesn't mean you have to agree. Consistently inviting different people. If you see the same people in the room all the time, maybe you reach out to your friend who represents the Hispanic community and you ask them, hey, do you have some Hispanic neighbors I can invite? Or do you, right? You ask about how can you get more people that do not look like you into the room? What does exclusion look like? Consistently mistaking two people of the same race or ethnicity. So calling, you know, Erica, Susie, and Susie, Erica, when just because they're of a certain race. Cutting only certain people off when talking. So we see this all the time in neighborhood councils. Certain people try to talk, but as soon as one person tries to speak, they just get cut off. They don't get their point. As leaders in the councils, you are responsible for that. And you need to check yourself because you're excluding others when you cut people off while they're talking. Leaving certain people off a list or invites. Only introducing members of the in-group at a meeting. So you have 20 people in the meeting, but you only introduce your friends. Avoiding eye contact with certain people. I've experienced that as a microaggression, and I know you talked about that earlier, but you're talking to everyone in the room, looking at everyone, but maybe not acknowledging certain people in marginalized groups. Cutting down ideas before they can be considered. Not even giving the person the opportunity to finish their sentence or get the idea out. Repeatedly misspelling or mispronouncing a name. This came up a lot with me. Of course, my name, Thiele, some people couldn't pronounce it. But after I became a doctor, which I finished my PhD last year, my own neighbors were adamant when the people on the board would not refer to me as doctor. It was so disruptive. Every public comment was, why are you not referring to her as a doctor? Let me tell you, respect people, respect their titles, especially in that setting. If they're a commissioner, you try your best to refer to them as commissioner. If they're the president of your council, refer to them as president. It is so important to do that, and that shows respect and inclusion. And you would want the same for yourself. Changing the voice pitch or volume, tone, or inflection when talking to that person. So I can tell you as a Black woman, I've experienced that microaggression, especially early in my career, where all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, you hear that where you start talking down, like that person may not understand only if they speak a certain way. So I think you get that. So let's do another scenario. You are leading a meeting and one of the community members has communicated to you that they are having difficulty understanding. What should you do? Assume that they do not speak English, ignore them, pause and seek clarification. Which one do you think? After all of that, you better know the answer. So what I was put in?
Seek clarification.
Seek clarification. Is it worth taking time out of the meeting to seek clarification, or should we just breeze over it? I know for our neighborhood council, we need as many neighbors participating as possible. I am not trying to alienate or exclude anyone. We need you on a committee. So if we could take 5 minutes to embrace and include people, we can start to really build some strong committees and actually do the work that we want to do in our communities. So that's why this session and talk around bias is so important. I truly believe that a lot of our neighbors don't feel included, or they feel intimidated when they come to our meetings, and we don't work hard enough to make them feel included. So this is truly important. So stop, and you stop and clarify, how can I help you, Imelda? How is it the way I said it? Let me repeat it. Let me send it to you. Let me put it on the screen. And then maybe you just give them your email and have them contact you later so you can explain. Okay. So here's one of the #1 obstacles. So I'm trying to move the bar out the way. Here we go. One of the number one obstacles to inclusion is unconscious bias. That's why we talk about bias so much. And people, I've been doing this for over 10 years. Trust me. I wish I didn't have to talk about biases all the time. It is real and it's the obstacle. And a lot of people disagree. That's fine. But unconscious bias is the one reason discrimination in recruitment, hiring, promotion, and other unfair practices continues to exist. I have been in human resources for 24 years, and this is the reason. One of the reasons, as I alluded to before, is our brain reaches conclusions without immediately telling us that it's reaching a conclusion. That's from Malcolm Gladwell, who's an amazing author. And so everyone does this. And so the reality is we have to kind of check ourselves. And we're going to do a cool exercise that actually came from the city's anti-bias training that now I've stolen and put in my presentation, which I love. And I want to see us do this exercise. So when you look at this is the first part of the exercise. Make sure you mute yourself because I don't want you to give out the answers, but you can do this out loud, but mute yourself. So read the colors out loud. I'm going to do it with you. We got blue, yellow, red, purple, and black, right? So we'll do that again. Blue, yellow, red, purple, black. Now for this part of the exercise, don't read the name of the color, but the actual color that you see. So for example, the first color you see would be yellow and not the word yellow. So mute yourself, but say it out loud as fast as you can. Okay. So so now I want to get your experience. How was it when you tried to say yellow, red, blue, green, purple? You had to think about it, right? So who could share their experience?
Challenging.
It's challenging because our brain immediately says blue, yellow, red, purple, black, not yellow, red, blue. See, it's a little slower. You got to kind of slow down, like make sure, oh yeah, there's green, purple. This is exactly what the purpose of bias training is about. It's about slowing down so we can give our brains a chance to catch up to the needs of the people in our world. So this is why bias training is important, because it is only when you are aware of your potential to be biased that you can check it at the door. If you think you got it going on and you know everything and your opinion is right, then you're not going to be able to check your bias at the door. So what is the impact? So when, sorry, multitasking. My brain also cannot do a lot of multitasking. So I know my limits. So we are not intentionally including, we are unintentionally excluding. So I'll repeat, when we are not intentionally including, we are unintentionally excluding. So for all of this, this means covering. So for me, because of certain stereotypes that I don't even like to repeat anymore, I personally had covered at times, right? To make sure I showed up a certain way. It's literally exhausting to try to show up and be who they think you should be and explain your point of view. And it causes you to disengage. I don't have time for this. I don't have time to show up every time, cover, be exhausted. We all suffer because that's why we don't want to show up to committee meetings. That's why we don't want to be a part of the neighborhood council. That's why we don't want to talk. It's exhausting. So for our community, what does this mean? When we can't figure it out, when we can't get along, there is a higher error in decision making. We've all seen decisions that are made because people have checked out and they're just voting on whatever. They're just gone. We have higher turnover on boards and councils. Again, people are checked out. They're tired. And there is either less or absolutely no innovation because you have the same homogenous people who've stuck around, Some may call them bullies. Some may call them, so I heard on another call, the old guard, whatever you want to call it. Innovative thought doesn't get through because we're excluding that innovation. Okay, we're wrapping up with take action. How am I, Erica, do you have any idea how I'm doing with time? I'm sorry. I'm trying to
Yes,
check
we
my,
have 5 minutes left.
how much? I couldn't hear you, you were muffled. How
Hello,
many?
can you- 5 minutes.
5? Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna zoom through here. So take action. Don't just accept diversity, seek out diversity. It's intentional. Here are some steps. Be aware, be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. When we don't know, ask questions. Develop relationships with people who don't look like you, right? Listen for suggestions from your peers and take steps to understand your environment. Here's something, it's not an exercise I'm going to do, but just really quickly, you're a leader. If you're on this call, I promise you, you're a leader. You're in some way, you're leading in a neighborhood, community. Leaders focus on their role in the community, not just their personal self-focus. They're self-aware. All of us are on a journey to self-awareness. You need to be able to be self-aware, to be influential. You're trying to change a policy. You're trying to influence the mayor. You need to be self-aware. I'll just leave it at that. And so this work is about being a culturally inclusive leader so you can make the changes you want to see. And how do you interrupt bias? Don't allow offensive comments from colleagues. When you hear this coming from the council committees, you need to say something, see something, say something. Intervene, be an ally, state another opinion. Okay, you don't know what to say. Oh, well, what about, well, maybe talk with the offended person, help them solve the problem. Don't laugh at offensive jokes. Trust me, we have so many offensive jokes at our meeting. I practice my poker face. I do not entertain it because I'm not giving that an audience. And try to do the same. Don't even comment. Just ignore it. When people make racial, they have their public comment moments. Don't entertain those comments. Manage your unconscious bias. Pause, ask, reflect, take action. That's what we've been talking about. Are those words hurtful to the ones around me? How are they playing a role in my thought process? How can I learn from this? How would I feel if I was in their shoes? And that's it. Thank you. I just wanted to stop at least, give you at least 5 minutes. Goodness gracious. Okay, so we have at least 5 minutes, right? To questions, answers, thoughts, comments. It doesn't have to be a question. Can we get a copy of this presentation? Yes, my gift to you. Thank you, Rebecca, for asking. Thank you, Erica. You told me 10 minutes, but I couldn't look at the chat. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, any thoughts or questions? Oh, let me stop sharing. Sorry. Okay.
I think it's important for us as leaders to practice, to come to the meeting prepared to say something in defense of the image and
Yes.
of what we want our council to represent. We can practice these behaviors everywhere, but when we're in a position of leadership and we are really representing other people, we need to make a concerted effort to, as you said, see something, say something, stand up for our constituents. If someone on the board is being too aggressive or not respectful, we can speak up and say how we feel about that. Not to create an encounter, but to let the audience know we're here we have the same inherent ideas of what we want for our community. So I think it's really important for us as individuals, even if it doesn't come naturally, because it is very exhausting to always have to think about, oh my God, what outrageous thing are they going to say that they think is a compliment that is, biased, you are so articulate. Well, did you expect me not to be able to speak? Those kinds of things, So I think each person has to work on it, really. Whether
Yes.
you are the person who's acting out or the person who happens to be the receiver of that bias.
Yes. Thank you so much, Imelda.
Thank
And
you.
Go ahead.
This is Fanny. I was just saying, thank you for the seminar. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
Hello,
Thank-
Dr. Thatch.
Hi,
Hello, Dr.
Colette.
Thatch. This is Colette Amin, the current Congress Planning Committee co-chair. And I would like to, first of all, in that position, thank you for hosting, for speaking in this workshop. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And then I would just like to mention that I believe, like yourself, of course, I am not going to go on because I have so many stories to tell. But like yourself, I've experienced all of the situations and issues you have mentioned. My name is Colette, but of course, I'm called Colette or Coolette or whatever, and no matter how I correct them. And then there's been real serious issues of offensive comments at board meetings, etc. And also, most importantly, downplaying all of my contributions and my positive input and not recognizing, my contribution as a board member to our system. And this happens from top down. I'm not saying it's only our board, any committee or whatever in our NC arena. So what my suggestion is, and maybe Raquel is on this call, but maybe we can look into, no, we need to look into having unconscious bias training, unconscious bias inclusion, unconscious bias plus inclusion, diversity inclusion, whatever you feel is necessary, Dr. Thatch, since you are the professional and the experienced person in this, we need to have this training offered to our NC members. This should be one of our mandatory training because the discrimination, the exclusion, the microaggressions, et cetera, are rampant in our NC system. I am also the diversity rep for a California association that is all over California. I'm the diversity rep at large for college administrators of higher education. And it really, really, really haunts me sometimes when I'm attending our NC board meetings and I see, or I've experienced personally on my own skin, this sort of comments or exclusion or dismissive behavior. And yes, like you said, someone had said the old guard. Then, we call it the old guard, etc. You said something that is so inspiring. You said that when we have these biases, there's no innovation. It was like a sermon, what you said. So I want to applaud you. I swear, I wanted to write in this chat, preach girl, but I want to applaud you. Thank you so much for being here. And we have to look into having some sort of mandatory training. And can we agree to speak with Raquel Beltran to get this going? Because we need it. And and for all the women on the call, don't forget that we have to deal with that as well, sexism as well.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much,
I had
Dr.
that.
Thatch.
Thank you. And Lauren, I see your hand and I know we're at time, but I definitely want to hear from you. I feel like you're my new friend, my new best friend.
Well, and I will be in touch, but what I want to say, first of all, is thank you so much for bringing so much class, insight, and intelligence to this issue that we as a city have ignored for far too long. Second, to my sister Colette, what's so hard about that name? Can somebody just tell me? You are near me. I'm on Echo Park. I say we form an alliance, working group or something to confront this head on and make some very pointed demands and share some very pointed criticism with Dunn. And lastly, I think that the training isn't enough. We must demand consequences, public consequences if necessary. Nothing persuades a bully to shut usually his mouth than public exposure and animus. We got rid of racists on my board using that technique. As somebody said to me today, the goal is to take it over, not just wait for the dinosaurs to die off.
Yeah, I think that was me.
Yeah, I know it was you. I didn't know whether you wanted me to ask you on that or not.
One thing you'll learn, everything I say, I'm happy you're recording it and it's unapologetic. It's time. It is time for us to take back our neighborhoods, take back our power. I'm not trying to say It's time. That's all. I'm just saying it's time.
It's
And
overtime.
it's overtime. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. It's overtime. And you know what? It's only going to benefit our communities,
No kidding.
period. So our communities need us. I always, especially in Van Nuys, I feel like they're kind of hiding in the shadows, trying to see, is it safe to come out? And I'm trying to tell them it's safe. We are going to create a safe space as much as we can. You know, we do have laws that allow for public comment, but even helping our neighbors manage the public comments. And then I do try to work with those neighbors who are really difficult to win their hearts and help them soften their hearts. I buy them like Subway, give them some snacks. Something about food, right? So anyhow, I appreciate you all. You feel like family to me. You know how to reach me. I'm at Van Nuys Neighborhood Council. I'm also tthatch@gmail. And I'll share this deck with Erica and figure out the best way to make sure everyone has access to it. And I like what you're talking about. I don't want to hold up the time too much, but if you want to meet and talk about ways that we can work with the Board of Neighborhood Councils to make sure we have our own equity, diversity, and inclusion focus amongst the councils, then I'm here. So I'm here for all of that. So we could probably be on the call for another hour. So anything that someone had to say before we go? I see yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Yes, I say yes too. Okay, well, Erica, how we doing?
Time is
I don't know, when you talk, it's a little muffled. You say that one more time.
up. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, better.
Yeah, our time is up.
Time is up. Okay, well, until the next time, see something,
Thank
say
you.
something. All
Thank
right, have a
you.
beautiful Saturday.
Thank you.
Have
You
a
do
beautiful
too.
day.
Bye, everybody.